So there is an issue with the Olmec Heads that you'll never really notice until you spend a significant amount of time in the Olmec region studying the Olmec civilization. Now, my first ever experience with any ancient monument or megalithic monument from the ancient world was in the town of Villahermosa, Mexico. I was walking through the park with Dr. Ed Barnhart, and we were talking about the Olmecs. We were talking about the ancient Maya city of Palenque, which we were going to see the next day and over the course of the 2 days following. And as I was looking out of this pond that was filled with crocodiles, he hits me on my arm and tells me, "Hey, look right there." And into the jungle of this little park is this massive main head from the Olmec city of La Venta staring straight at me. It was the very first ancient monument that I'd ever seen. I had seen Indian mounds in the US before. I'd seen totem poles and things like that in Alaska traveling as a kid, but I had never been anywhere outside of the country up to this point. My parents were big on us traveling throughout the US, and I had never been really anywhere else in the world. So this was like another world from far, far away that had been calling out to me from somewhere deep inside of my being. And now I'm finally looking at this silent giant Olmec head staring straight back at me. It's like I was in this place that I'd been meant to be in for so long, and this moment had finally come. For anyone who hasn't traveled through the Olmec world, the main thing that you think about, the iconic monument that tends to define Olmec civilization, is their heads. They're unlike anything else in the ancient world, set aside for maybe the moai of the island of Rapa Nui or Easter Island. There are just these massive heads that were erected in the earliest times of American civilization in general. I mean, in fact, the Olmecs are the oldest recognized, fully fledged civilization throughout North America. They built possibly the oldest pyramids in North America, at the Pyramid of La Venta going back to possibly 1000 BC, although there really may be some other mounds and pyramids further up in North America, like in the southeast or the mid-east, that are possibly much older, built by the Adena people or people before them. But the Olmecs are the oldest recognized confirmed civilization of North America. And these monuments, these heads that they created, are so unlike anything else in the ancient world that it captures people's imagination, and it's what you think of when you think about the Olmecs. But what I always tell people who travel with myself or me and Dr. Barnhart through the Olmec world is I ask them the same question. When you think of the Olmecs, what do you think of? They always think of the heads. And I say, by the end of this expedition, I think you'll think of something else rather than the Olmec heads when I tell you about the Olmecs. That blows people's minds. So while the Olmecs are worried about, building civilization in North America, you and I have different problems, like keeping our personal information personal. And that's why today's sponsor, Cloaked, has challenged me to see just how exposed my personal information really is. So I've entered my phone number into their website, and wow, I found my old addresses, relatives, and even my social security number. Obviously, I'm blurring all the sensitive information, but that's alarming. Now, the reason this happens is because data brokers make billions and billions of dollars by selling your personal information. Every account you create, every newsletter you sign up for, every app you download, it all feeds this machine. They bury it down in the terms and conditions, and they're betting that you'll never do anything about it. And the problem is that most services only remove your information after it's already been bought and sold. And then the next time you sign up for something, the whole cycle starts again. And that's why I've started to use Cloaked. It helps remove your information from data brokers, but it also lets you generate unlimited burner emails, as well as phone numbers and usernames whenever you sign up for something. And you can even call, text, and email from those burner accounts right within the app. That means that data brokers can't tie those accounts back to your real identity, and the information that they're buying and selling is just fake. Cloaked also monitors the dark web, includes a VPN, a password manager, AI spam call filtering, and up to $1 million in identity theft insurance. So go to cloaked.com/Luke Caverns, enter your phone number for a free security scan, and see if your social security number is already exposed. The longer you wait, the more your information gets bought and sold. So if you're ready to take your privacy back, use my link to get 30% off any Cloaked plan. Thank you to Cloaked for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the show. But they don't realize The problem with the Olmec heads is that the Olmec heads represent a tiny, tiny little sliver of Olmec civilization, and possibly not even the most important part of Olmec civilization. Now, what I think that the heads represent are definitely kings of some kind that are not affiliated with this were-jaguar cult. There's something that exists outside of that. So my guess is some kind of royal lineage. How else could an individual person be so powerful as to commission fine-grained basalt from the Sierra de la Tuxtla volcanic belt that's about 100 kilometers northwest of the Olmec heartland, and you're either sending out expeditions to collect this basalt and bring it back, or you are paying the native people of the Tuxtla Mountain region to quarry, cut, and transport these blocks for you, and then you're paying stonemasons to erect. I mean, it's a massive expedition that has to be carried out on behalf of these individuals. And when you look at the heads, it's obvious that these are portraits of certain individual people. I've seen some people propose the idea that maybe each of them represent one mythological character and that it's some kind of person in the Olmec world, but I don't think that that lines up either. I think that each of them are a different individual person and that they're a portrait of somebody who lived during the time that the head was erected. One of the reasons being is that all the helmets are individualized, and we can't speak Olmec. We don't know what the Olmecs called themselves or what this language was, but we see these pictographic, like logogram writing symbolic system that exists throughout their monuments. And while we can't read them, we can sort of interpret what they might be based on what we see in symbology later on in Mesoamerica. So when you look on the top of that main head at La Venta, it has these 3 claw marks with this crescent or this badge, this emblem in the center of it. Now, those 3 claw marks probably mean 3 something. Maybe he's the 3rd, who knows? But each of those are unique and individualized to each of those heads. So my guess is that they are individual people who lived at different times, maybe even in different centuries and millennia, that probably ruled over the Olmec world to a certain extent. We think that the Olmec realm is where divine kingship is born. This idea that a person is born with this divine right to rule. This is a sort of a unique concept in general, even though we see it all throughout the ancient world. And it was something that influenced the Maya world thousands of years later, or a couple thousand years later. But that little sliver of these people who may have ruled in some way, shape, or form, that little sliver is just a tiny little piece of the Olmec world, and probably not the most important piece, or maybe not the most culturally predominant. If you lived back in the time of the Olmecs and you were to visit them and ask them about the head, they may look at it and say, oh yeah, this head represents King so-and-so, but the were-jaguar cult in the ball game is much more significant culturally than this emperor or this king, this ruler himself. Now, the thing that is so much more predominant is the cult of the were-jaguar. All throughout the Olmec world, everywhere that we go, whether it is the La Venta Park, which is the first place that I saw this Olmec head for the first time with Ed Barnhart, or whether it is the actual site of La Venta itself and the little hut museum that's there, the Museum of Jalapa, the Western Citadel of Chalcatzingo, or the site of San Lorenzo and the little museum at San Lorenzo, so on and so forth. All these Olmec sites, save for this later epi-Olmec city of Tres Zapotes, which existed sometime around 200 BC. This is the very, very last chapter of the Olmecs. From 1800 BC all the way to about 200 BC, this rise and fall of this predominant Olmec empire of sense, at least a cultural empire, the most important and predominant thing that you will see is the were-jaguar. These people who can transform themselves from human form to the physical form of a jaguar and somewhere in between. It's literally everywhere. If you go through the Olmec realm from Tabasco all the way to Mexico City, and you look at every Olmec archaeological site and every little museum you can go to, you will see over and over and over again on hundreds or thousands of discovered Olmec artifacts this depiction of the were-jaguar. It is so much more predominant than these Olmec heads. In fact, I can't think of a single Olmec artifact that depicts a head. That might seem obvious, but almost every Olmec artifact depicts this were-jaguar. And what I think is that only one person could be this ruler. Only one person could be the ruler, and a small percentage of that ruler's family, or a small percentage of the actual population, is a part of that ruler's family. But many, many, many different people were involved in this were-jaguar cult. Dozens or hundreds of people were. The reason I say this is because at the site of La Venta, we have this little cache that was discovered that's made out of these gray and red stones with 5 little serpentine stelae with carvings behind them. And what this depicts is such a rare screenshot, essentially, of something taking place in ancient times, even though we don't know the context, but it's with maybe 24 people that are part of this sacred procession. And what's very interesting is we know exactly where this took place. It was at the base of the Great Pyramid of La Venta, sitting in front of the 5 or 6 stelae that were there. It's a recreation of something that happened at the base of that stele that had to do with the were-jaguar cult. And we see were-jaguars literally everywhere, all throughout the Olmec world. We see them emerging from caves carrying babies, which is very interesting. I think, to me, this little research that I've done, there were studies that came out in the 1970s that showed that children who are born in the Olmec heartland of what is today Veracruz, indigenous children, were disproportionately born disfigured with a condition called ectodermal dysplasia. Ectodermal dysplasia does not always come with a learning disability, but sometimes people are born with 2 little fangs that grow in the front of their mouth. It's not always that way, but they have little pointy teeth that they don't grow the same sort of teeth that we do today. And with my wife being a dentist, I've had a lot of conversations with her about this. Now, that population of people with ectodermal dysplasia in Veracruz is gone today. It fizzled out with modern medicine and, I guess selective breeding, right? But there's another population in the Western Yucatan where modern day Maya people, who may have been the descendants of Olmecs that migrated north during the collapse of the classical periods, over the course of thousands of years, these different genetic populations of people move and migrate and assimilate into different cultures. But I think it is at least pointing towards the presence of ectodermal dysplasia in the ancient Mesoamerican world. Now, if it's prominent enough to be recognized today, imagine how prominent it was in ancient times. So what I think it is that these Olmec people are seeing children that are born with fangs, but they don't have a learning disability, and they don't die as easily as children born with other disabilities, which you do see throughout the Olmec world as well. We see these little babies that look like they may have been born with Down syndrome. And I think that the reason that there are so many baby effigies and little baby statues is probably to honor that life that was ended so short. Either they had to sacrifice them because maybe times are scarce and they don't have the food or the provisions to keep these children alive, so they're sacrificed and then they're honored with these statues, or they just don't survive and then as a result they're honored with these statues. It's one or the other. This is something that was happening in the ancient Greek world as well, that we like to imagine this cruel reality where you see babies that are imperfect, that are then sacrificed or left up on the mountainside. And we see that as like this especially cruel thing that has to do with aesthetics, but really it has to do with survival. You have a limited amount of provisions, and it's very, very hard to just keep the people that you have alive and well fed. And when you have somebody who isn't able to actively contribute to society like your standard person, well, then they determine that maybe this life is meant to be sacrificed and given back to the gods. So we see that in the ancient Greek world, we see it in the Maya world, we see it, I think, almost certainly in the Olmec world as well, if we can use later cultures to interpret what earlier cultures are doing. And so what I'm getting at here is I think that a lot of people were born with ectodermal dysplasia in the Olmec world, and the way that they rationalized this was they equated through some means to the fiercest but yet most similar animal in their natural world, which was this jaguar. This jaguar is this all-encompassing. Think about it from this point of view. You have Native Americans who come into the Americas not knowing what beasts and creatures they're going to interact with. Maybe they are familiar with cats, but all the cats that they would have seen, the puma, the bobcat, the lynx, none of these cats really want anything to do with water. But you see the jaguar. It's literally a creature that can be seen during the daytime. It can be seen at night. It can be seen in the water, below the water, above the water, on land. And its color palette is this black and yellow, almost like the stars of the night sky, or life and death, or the upper world and the underworld. And it's the most powerful creature that they are aware of. And in fact, it's the most powerful cat on the entire planet. We think about the African lion and the tiger. Those are the only two cats across the entire planet that are bigger than the jaguar, but their bite force is either half or only 2/3 as powerful as the bite force of a jaguar. And a jaguar is widely hailed as the most vicious cat to have backed into a corner. When they fight back, they're far more vicious than any other large cat on the planet. So this is the predominant beast of the Americas. And so I think that they want to align themselves with this cat. I don't think they're trying to make something up. They're trying to rationalize their natural world, and they see these people as being born with the traits of jaguars. And so over thousands and thousands of years, like Ed Barnhart says so many times, by the time you see it carved into stone, they've been at this for a long time. These cultures are much more ancient than the artifact record can tell us, right? This goes back much deeper in time than any of us actually realize. This is something that ancient people who predated the Olmecs could have believed almost 10,000 years ago or so. But what I'm getting at is this were-jaguar phenomena is a cultural phenomenon that swept across the Olmec world. And I think it's responsible for the burying of Olmec heads. We see some Olmec heads that look like they're pushed into the ground. And on the top of the head, you see claw marks. You see claw marks sometimes on the face and definitely across the back of these Olmec heads. We see Olmec heads that were turned on their sides and recarved. And you can see the ear that's being used in an altar. And what we see is it's almost like an assault on the standard Olmec heads that don't have anything to do with the were-jaguar. So what I think we're seeing is two different classes of society that feud against each other during certain points in time. And by the time the last cultural capital of the Olmec world, Tres Zapotes, arises, the were-jaguar cult is nowhere to be found anymore. It's like it was defeated by the royal families or something. But the Olmecs also had influence in the Maya of Belize at a site called Cerros. And they taught those Maya people how to build a divine kingship government. Now, the Maya tried it out. It only worked for about a century and a half or so, and then it fell apart. But that influence stayed in Belize because in the Maya of Belize is the only other place that we see were-jaguars. So it's this cultural phenomenon that was so important, and it permeated so deeply through not only the Olmec world, but also the Mesoamerican world of the coastal Maya out in Belize, that were-jaguar continued on. And of course, you see the were-jaguar in Central America and South America as well. So the problem with the Olmec head is that it tends to loom over and overshadow the aspects of Olmec culture that were actually probably more important to the Olmec themselves, rather than these massive projects that were being performed on behalf of some, conceivably some super powerful ruler. So those are just some thoughts on the Olmecs. Like and subscribe for more videos of the history and mystery of ancient places all around the world. I'm Luke, and I'll catch you next time.